Council will call the meeting to order. For the record, it is October 1st, 2024 at 6 p.m. We'll begin tonight's city council meeting with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Cavanagh. Councilwoman Little Roberts. Here. Councilman Taylor. Here. Councilman Overton. Here. Councilwoman Strader. Here. Mayor Simison.
Here. Next time up is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd all please rise and join us in the pledge. United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next up is our community invocation. Is Chris present? Chris Howe? Oh, if you'd like to come up, and I'm sorry, I turned that around on you. I didn't really think about the community invocation. I think Chris has got it, so. If you would all please join us in the community invocation or take this as a moment of silence and reflection.
Dear Heavenly Father, we're grateful for the peace in our city. We're grateful for the devotion of our civil servants and these elected officials. We ask a blessing on this meeting that we might work together for the benefit of our city and for the whole. Help us to do all we can to continue to receive a blessing of prosperity and peace in the city. This we pray, uniting our faith in Thee. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you. Next up is adoption of the agenda.
Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
there are no changes this evening, so I move we adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda as published. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the agenda is adopted. Next up is the consent agenda.
Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
move we approve the consent agenda as presented for the mayor to sign, the clerk to attest.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the consent agenda was agreed to. There are no items moved from the consent agenda. So we will now go on to our first item, which is a proclamation for Fire Prevention Week. So Chief and Carly and whoever else that wants to be coming up, if you would like to join me at the podium. So I will do a proclamation, but I'll turn it over to you all for the best words in the House about Fire Prevention Week. Whereas the city of Meridian is committed to ensuring the safety and security of all those living in and visiting our city. And whereas fire is a serious public safety concern both nationally and locally, and homes are the locations where people are at greatest risk from fire. And whereas Meridian's fires first responders are dedicated to reduce the occurrence of home fires and related injuries through prevention education. And whereas Meridian residents are responsive to public education measures and are able to take personal steps to increase their safety from fire. And whereas this year's theme, Smoke Alarms, Make Them Work For You, effectively reminds us about the importance of having smoke alarms in the home, and the Meridian Fire Department supports the campaign theme to heed the call to action, install, test, and replace. Therefore, I, Mayor Robert E. Simpson, hereby proclaim the month of October 6th through 12th, 2024 as Fire Prevention Week in the city of Meridian, and call upon the community to observe the important safety message of Fire Prevention Week and to be prepared with smoke alarms in your home to keep the community safe. Today, this first day of October, 2024. So with that, Carly, Chief, Carly, go ahead.
I just want to thank the City of Meridian for your support in community risk reduction. I have a quote that I just want to share that I think is really important. I think I actually heard it from Chief Bloom, and it's, "There's no honor in responding to an emergency that could have been prevented." And that's kind of our goal with Fire Prevention Week and just community risk reduction overall, is helping our community prepare so that they don't have to experience these emergencies, such as home fires or cardiac arrests or different events that our first responders have to go to, but better enable them to be prepared for these types of things, and they can prevent them prior to them happening. So I appreciate your dedication towards this effort, Mayor, and the City of Meridian as a whole. So thank you.
Next item up is item 18, which is the Just Serve City Awards. So I don't know who is Karen. Are you? Is it Jenna Lee? Okay, Jenna Lee and Bren. Good evening.
Thank you, Council, for inviting us to be with you tonight. My name is Janalee Wolf, and I'm the Meridian Area Just Serve Specialist. And this is Bren Booker, who is the Boise Area Just Serve Specialist, who has worked with the city for several years. For those who haven't heard of Just Serve, it is an app and a website that allows the community to find ways to volunteer. Today, we are here to present the city with a Just Serve City Award, which is a recognition designed to honor cities that demonstrate an exceptional commitment to volunteerism and have made a significant impact in their community through these efforts. To receive this designation as a Just Serve City, a city must publish a proclamation that recognizes the value of volunteer work and engage with volunteering throughout the city. Mayor Simison has signed a proclamation for Volunteer Appreciation Week, signed 4 proclamations for Do the Right Day, and in conjunction with the Boise and Nampa mayors, he signed a Treasure Valley proclamation for the Multi-Faith Action Project that encourages community members to serve together.
We recognize the City of Meridian for their yearly emphasis on volunteerism and for utilizing Just Serve as community service platform in their city. The City of Meridian has utilized Just Serve as a resource for their annual Do the Right Day, partnered with Just Serve and the West Ada School District for the Do the Right Day Fair, highlighted Just Serve on their My Meridian podcast, supported service projects with Just Serve for Global Youth Service Day and 9/11 National Day of Service, and they've listed volunteer opportunities on Just Serve. The city's previous volunteer coordinator, Jaime Del Barrio, did a fantastic job of sharing volunteer opportunities on Just Serve, like Spark Light Movie Night, Trunk or Treat, the Winter Lights Parade, and the city's flower planting project. We appreciate how the City of Meridian has encouraged unity and city values through community service and could not be more honored to be presenting this award to the mayor and the city council in the City of Meridian. This is well-deserved, this Just Serve City Award.
The City of Meridian will receive a framed certificate and a Just Serve swag items that you'll be able to share. Recognition on the Just Serve website when the awards page is created, and they'll be celebrated on local Just Serve Treasure Valley social media accounts.
Congratulations to the mayor, city council, and the entire City of Meridian for being a standard of volunteerism truly in our community. Your leadership and example makes Meridian a wonderful place to live, work, and build unity in the community through service. Thank you so much for all that you do. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Brand, Shelley, and we will come down. I know we want to do a picture real quick, but I just want to first say thank you for what you all do. I mean, it's great to have you recognize us for the relationship and partnership, but you're out there connecting people, and I know providing a lot of opportunities for people to come and volunteer. And I'm back there shaking his head up and down. He agrees. We know we couldn't do what we do as a city community without the efforts of you and so many others. And so thank you for the relationship and partnership. All right. Well, council, should we do a picture? You want to invite others back to join up as well? Okay. Are we good on? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You have the most high profile. Thank you.
Good to see you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, council. We're on to the next item, public forum. Anyone sign up, Mr. Clerk?
Mr. Mayor, yes. Perry Coles.
All right. Perry, would you like to come forward and speak at this time? I know you might be here for an item specifically. I know it's not a public hearing, but I assume that you would want to hear from a member of the community that came to talk about the item. So you can either wait and do it when we bring it up, or you're happy to give a comment now, whichever way you'd prefer. Okay. Yeah. Perfect. Sounds good. Thanks, Perry. So with that, we'll move on to item 19, which was an action item for fiscal year 2025 budget amendment in the amount of 14,000 for police canine unit and equipment. Captain?
Thank you, Mayor. This is a budget amendment in front of you for FY '25 for $14,000 to replace one of our canines a little early. As many of you know, our department has 6 dual-purpose canines. We usually replace them in batches, ideally 3 at a time. But we're kind of in a unique situation, replacing this one early because the handler that had this dog, which was the second handler to have this specific dog, has promoted and is no longer going to handle the dog. And we are currently evaluating and training 3 others. So doing this early really helps us out because it's about a 400-hour training process. And if we can get, the more dogs we can get into this training cycle, the better. As you all know, it's a heavy lift to get through that training and get the dogs out there to help us. So with that, I would stand for any questions.
Thank you. Council, any questions for staff? Then do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Lil Roberts.
Mr. Mayor, it is an honor to, I just lost my spot. To move that we approve the budget amendment for a new canine for $14,000.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve Item 19, is there discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
quick. So if I understand correctly, this one that we're doing the budget amendment for would join the other three that we already planned to cycle, and so we're gonna do four together. Is that the plan?
Correct. Yep.
Great. And then, Mr. Mayor, just a comment.
Councilman-
Congratulations, first, budget amendment of the year. You couldn't get it any closer if you tried. Totally recognize what occurred that brought this forth us today, but still have to give you a hard time for bringing the first budget amendment of the year.
And we worked with our finance partners and lined this all up months ago, but it's just kind of how it fell.
Got it. All good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Is there further discussion on the motion? All right, if not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh.
Aye.
Little Roberts.
Aye.
Taylor.
Aye.
Overton.
Aye.
Strater.
Aye.
All ayes, motion carries, the item is agreed to. Okay, and with that, we'll move on to item 20, which is our city council discussion of drive-through and conditional use permit process. We'll turn this over to Bill to begin the conversation.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Yeah, Mr. Neri came and spoke to me last week and said you guys wanted us to come and do a presentation. I don't think it has to be very formal. It looks like it's more of a public forum and an open discussion with council this evening. But I did put together a slideshow. As you all know, in the UDC, conditional use permit authority is granted by you to the Planning and Zoning Commission. And that's what I've kind of highlighted on this table here. So this is this is the tool we use to guide people through the public hearing process with us. And so when someone comes and speaks to us about a conditional use permit, we tell them you're going before Planning and Zoning Commission and it's a public hearing. And that's where it usually stops. They're the decision-making body unless somebody appeals their decision on that application. And on occasion that has occurred where they can come do that. The other item that you see highlighted on this particular screen is the recent change that we did last year where you were starting to see a lot of development agreement modifications ahead of the conditional use permits. And some of you weren't feeling comfortable about acting on a DA when you didn't have the CUP in front of you. You're like, why are we approving a concept plan with this type of use when the use hasn't been approved? So you asked staff to go back to the drawing board, amend the code. And so now whenever there's a concurrent development agreement modification associated with a conditional use, essentially the P&Z has become the recommending body and you guys get to make the decision on that in conjunction with the DA modification. So those are probably the two notable changes when we have a conditional use permit. And oftentimes, as council knows, a conditional use is majority of the time is associated with a companion application or concurrent application. So you see a lot of those in advance. I'll go ahead and go through my slideshow. So one of the things as I was preparing for today's presentation or tonight's presentation is I wanted to go back and see how many drive-throughs have we approved the last 4 years or so, and just kind of, well, I guess it's 5 years or part of this year, and see what we've really done. And out of those, as you can see here, a majority of those are either drive-through restaurants or banks. That seemed to be the common theme from 20 until now. Currently, we still have 5 in process now, so I won't go into a lot of those details because some of those may come in front of you. But you can see here our busiest year was 2022. So not a lot of drive-throughs historically, but as you know, there are other uses in the code that require a conditional use permit that aren't associated with a drive-through. So again, in our ordinance, we do conditional use is one of those that it's a use that's allowed in that zone, but there's conditions that go along with that. So, and then of course, I went ahead and for other talking points. I'm not sure where council wants to take this discussion this evening, but again, I know last time when I was before you on September 10th, speaking about some changes I had proposed, I believe the conversation the council had is, well, do we define each different drive-through? Do we define uses differently? For example, is a bank drive-through defined differently than a restaurant drive-through? You can clearly see in this the definition that it isn't. A drive-through is a drive-through. And my time with the city, there have been a couple bank drive-throughs that have been converted to a restaurant drive-through. So it's very conceivable that if we do approve a drive-through for a bank, that in the future, if another drive-through were to move into that vacant building and commence a different use, a restaurant with a drive-through, if still be considered, although it's a change of use for the restaurant from the bank, the drive-through would still be vested or approved or allowed to continue under that conditional use permit. So we don't have that ability to go back before the Planning and Zoning Commission or the City Council, if it were the case, to change any of those conditions. It kind of runs with the land. What we have noticed, and at least the trends and then the conversations that I've had with our stakeholders, our customers, that if you, and I'm sure a lot of the council members are pretty savvy with this too, is a lot of the drive-throughs are going app-based now. Or where you can order online and you go through the drive-through and they just hand it to you out the window and you don't have to really order anymore or have a menu board. So you do move cars quicker through those drive-throughs. I've seen that trend. And so when we've met with applicants, they say, and we ask them to put that information in their narrative. And we, so that way, when we approve the project, we're not approving it with a menu board or a speaker. We're like, no, you're approved based on how you operate. And if another drive-through does go in there that wants a menu board or speaker, we're going to have you come back and modify that CUP. So we've taken that proactive approach so that we don't just give them a blanket approval. We'll say, no, here's a condition of your CUP, which is a requirement of the CUP, is when you want to do something different or change how you operate, then you are coming back. But that's some of the experience that I have seen recently with the conditional use permits. And I know I'm gearing up the next UDC focus group meeting to bring up the revised changes that I brought to you or shared with you back on the 10th. You asked us to study those a little bit more. So I think a couple things we could address as part of that is I've seen on a couple occasions if ACHD has concerns with stacking of vehicles or queuing of vehicles, they do require that a queuing analysis to be part of their review and approval. As you know, we're not technical experts on those types of documents, but it's something that I have thought about in these situations where you have a pretty heavy user, a pretty busy restaurant that's new to the area, and you got to wait for more to come online to kind of balance out the popularity of it. That may be one option where we can require them to give us a queuing analysis, have a traffic engineer stamp that and inform us how that's going to operate. That's one thing that I don't currently have in the changes that I shared with you, but it's something that I took note of as we discussed that topic a couple weeks ago. That's really all I had for the council tonight, unless you have any other specific questions.
Mr. Mayor,
Thank you, Bill. Councilman Overton.
just a real quick clarification, Bill. The queuing analysis is required by ACHD.
Yeah, so Mayor, members of the council, Councilman Overton, only if they have concerns that it may stack on public right away. It's not necessarily a private property issue. It's more of if, for example, that stacking lane, there's a potential for cars to back up. And we have that on occasion. I think you're probably aware of some of our coffee vendors where the city had to get involved and work with ITD and ACHD to mitigate some of those concerns. But yeah, if they have concerns that will stack on their public right of way, they will ask for that.
Thank you, Bill. Mr. Mayor, follow up.
Councilman Overton.
Maybe just to kind of open this from a little bit different perspective. I think I might have been the one to kick this ball the first time this time. It is my understanding that it was approximately, and correct me if I'm wrong, 20 years ago that this process was changed so that these drive-throughs would be approved at the P&Z level. And prior to that, they were all approved in front of City Council. And at that time, this was a much more efficient way to move through this process. And what we have now is we're getting, they're not just dry cleaners, they're not just banks. We're actually finding that we're getting and attracting some of these, and they're all restaurants that I know of, that basically have raging fans. And I mean raging, I mean people that are willing to go a few times a week. And sometimes those raging fans are my grandkids in the back of my car, and I'm doing the on my phone ordering food sitting in that drive-through. So I completely understand why they're popular. What I get concerned with is not when they're on a private property situation, because that stacking is the responsibility of the private property. But I'm very much concerned about when we have stacking that stacks out into roadways outside of their site plan that's going to interfere with either neighborhood traffic or business traffic. That's where I brought this up. I think that if we don't somehow get a chance to take a look at these and we end up getting approval of these and it becomes a problem, I think it really kind of falls back on us that we didn't do that due diligence to take the steps necessary to make sure that it was right when it first occurred. So that's kind of where I was bringing this up. I want to have this conversation and see whether we need to make a change. Obviously, I think over 95% of our drive-throughs in the city are not going to cause us any stacking issues. It's only a few that are very highly successful when it comes to how their drive-through business works.
So, Mr. Mayor, can I
Mr. Hood?
respond a little bit to that? Because I do believe Councilman Overton is somewhat regurgitating some of our conversation about this. And I know it's been this way for at least 21 years because we haven't changed it since I've been here. So I think that's why in at least 20 years, what you see on the screen and that this authority that you've delegated to P&Z has been the case. I actually didn't do the research. I don't know how much longer before that it's been the case, but this has been the way we've done business. Mr. Neri's been in one capacity or another part of this for some time, so he could probably, and with a little research, we could figure it out. It is typical. I think there are a couple of things here, and maybe it's just to dissect them as you talk about them all together, right? There's the process, and we can do whatever council wants. If you want to change it from P&Z being the final authority on conditional use permits, that's your call. We can change the code, do it like all the others, run them through so you know what's going on in your community and you're the final approver on conditional use permits. I think where Bill was trying to take it in September and even going forward and through the UDC focus group is trying to address the standards so we don't get so many CUPs and we'll take it off of everybody's plate. And we say, if you can do this queuing analysis and you satisfy X, Y, and Z, you don't need any other special approvals. We'll try to do this administratively if we can. If we can't, and that's not satisfied, we'll still have some version of a conditional use permit process. In that, though, I want you to be aware, just be careful a little bit what you ask for, because drive-throughs are not the only conditional use permit. There are 100 uses that also are a conditional use permit. So you could get a lot more on your plate if you just simply say, not P&Z anymore, council. You'll be getting daycares, you'll be getting all kinds of other uses that are conditionally allowed in those zones. So again, back in the day, I don't know intent or why city fathers of that time said, hey, this is the right approach. P&Z do all these. But just want you to be aware, if you go that direction, it wouldn't just be drive-through conditional use permits, it would be conditional use permits. So again, we're just eyes wide open. It might be the right thing to do, and I'm not saying it's wrong. Just we can show you all the uses that require conditional use permit. And maybe there's a way we can even parse that up to say drive-throughs, CUPs. If that's the only flavor of CUP you want to see, we potentially could do that. Anyways, I just wanted to speak a little bit, and times change, and maybe it is appropriate for council to review drive-throughs and or all CUPs.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Overton?
Yeah, Caleb, exactly what you're saying. And some of the information I got on time was both from you and from our city attorney, who served on the council at that time. And I believe it was done for the right reasons. I think it was done to try to shorten the process, make it more efficient, which we're always trying to figure out a way to make our system more efficient for people going through it. I'm certainly not looking at trying to lengthen that for all CUPs. And I don't know whether there's a way we can just parcel out. I don't know if you want to say parcel out any that, I feel like I'm picking on some if they say we parcel out just restaurants, or if there's a way to parcel out just those CUPs for drive-throughs that just by the site plan and the nature of how it is, if there's stacking, it's going to be on a public right-of-way, not on a private area inside of a development.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
maybe to Bill and Kelly, what I think maybe Councilmember Overton's inquiring about is if a drive-through would require a queuing analysis from ACHD, would that be a threshold to then come before the council for approval?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Cavanagh, it could be, right? That would be a standard we could adopt in our code and say when some certain threshold, and this is what I don't know with ACHD is how do they know when to ask for that queuing analysis? What are the things they're looking for in their site planning when they say, you know what, for this one, we need a queuing analysis, but for that one, we don't? I don't know where that line is.
Mr. Mayor, if I can.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Caleb, I think I'm in the same spot, and I think it was either you or Bill said, we're not experts on this particular piece. That's why we rely on the partnership with the Highway District. And what I think where Councilmember Overton's coming from, he doesn't want to be subjective. He wants to remain objective, but also maybe wants a narrow set of sideboards of what would necessarily come to us so that we're not sacrificing efficiency just for council to always have their fingerprints on it. There's a basis on which these particular types of projects that have already been called out from the experts as maybe requiring more diligence, those naturally would then come to us for final approval.
And
I don't want to put words in Councilmember Overton's mouth. That's I think what I was kind of hearing from him.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
you're not putting words in my mouth. You're actually probably saying it a little better than I was saying it, so I appreciate that. I guess one of the ways I'd like to maybe drive this home. When a business owner in the city calls me because there's going to be an issue with the stacking or potential issue with the stacking on a drive-through that's coming to the city, and I get involved and want to try to help and see what we can do. What I came to learn, and I didn't know that I wasn't going to get a chance to look at this because of the process, was that they're not calling members of P&Z. They're calling their representatives on council to be the one that they would discuss this with, although we do not have a chance to review it. So it's what I'm trying to avoid is a situation where we try to do our best to help, whether it's a homeowner or a business owner, but by the time we're having contact, it's too late. And if that queuing analysis, if we knew enough about how that was structured and it was consistent in how that was requested, and that could be the tipping point, I would be okay with that. I just don't have any parameters to go by on whether that would be enough to take it to the level. If the queuing analysis is required, then it comes in front of city council.
Mr. Mayor, if I can address some of those remarks and kind of take it up slightly different, but in the same vein. Yes, that's an outstanding question. We need to get with ACHD and probably even ITD because some of these are, their drive-throughs are affecting state facilities as well. So it's not just ACHD, but ITD as well, and understand, where that bar is or what are they looking for again in that queuing analysis request. I want to, again, transition back to the process a little bit more though first. Conditional use permit, and Bill kind of said it, but I want to just make sure everyone understands this. It's not a principally permitted or otherwise allowed use, but it's really darn close. It's tough for the city to deny those. It's a approval with appropriate conditions. So I just want to make sure that you understand it's really not, and you're used to saying yay or nay, thumbs up or thumbs down. And this is more of a yes and. Yes, you get to do that, but here's some things you need to also do to address your impact. So I just don't want to mislead anybody that if you get conditional use permits, we don't want that here now. No, it's just short of an entitlement. You're almost there, but with some appropriate conditions that mitigate those impacts. So I just please just keep that in your mind as you're coming up with this. And I think that may have played into why, again, 20 some years ago, the city said, let's give that to P&Z. They can come up with appropriate conditions for those projects. Not if the project's appropriate or not, but appropriate conditions for those uses in those zones. Yes, we need the queuing analysis. And again, then that's where that comes. And even so, right? ACHD is not denying those projects. There's conditions that they're going to put on them. Add a pork chop. This is right in, right out instead, or whatever those whatever that queuing analysis shows to do there, but it really isn't a denial for most of these. It's a approval with, so I won't say that again. But anyways, I just want that process piece. We'll see what we can find out. And also, just as I give the mic back, I really think that's where staff is kind of headed with this, is let's standardize this. And then when it's not appropriate, we do need to daylight that with our community, whether it be P&Z or council. Let's get that into a form where it's not, where we do have a little more ability to say no, because the queuing, and there is no mitigation for that. It's just not the right location. We anticipate too many cars, and there's nothing you can do aside from going somewhere else. The site is just located in a location where you can't do anything about it. You can't operate that business without having a negative impact on our community. We're trying to get there with these standards through the UDC focus group and other professionals to say, okay. Anyways.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cameron.
in response to that, either for you, Caleb, or Bill, that is 100% correct, but council could apply additional conditions as part of that conditional use permit request, correct? So if it comes before us, and yes, again, I've learned it's very, very hard to deny a CUP because we're conditioning this use. But council could say, well, we appreciate what has come recommended, but we also think A, B, C, and D are also required in order to meet the needs, correct?
Absolutely. And Bill's been quiet thus far, and I'm not asking him to speak necessarily, right? There needs to be some nexus though, right, to those conditions, right? They shouldn't be just arbitrary so you can otherwise get to a denial. Hey, we need you to, make them do loop-de-loops before they go through your drive-through, or, turn your, window on the other side so it's through the passenger. It needs to be something like reasonable, right? That is trying to mitigate the concern you have. But absolutely, yes. Council, P&Z, staff, whoever gets a bite to say, do these things to, again, mitigate any negative impacts to our community that this may cause. So yes.
Councilman Schrader, did you?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, please, if you don't mind. I don't think that our city council would put arbitrary conditions on a business that needed a CUP. So I just wanted to say that. But I kind of was going with, if we feel like a queuing analysis will come consistently enough in the process for like the most problematic ones, I think that might make sense. Or I was curious about exploring the possibility where we give the Planning and Zoning Commission discretion on some of the more challenging CUPs to send it to City Council for review. That might be another approach that we could take. If in their view if there was some sort of a standard, like they thought that this could have a very adverse impact on surrounding streets, et cetera, they could have the ability to the discretion to send it to us to opine on it. That might be another method. Just throwing that out there for consideration.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Taylor.
So Bill and Caleb, I'm going to try to articulate what I'm thinking, and I hope I can do a good job. So follow me if you can. So with the conditional use permit, and Caleb, I like the way you articulated it. It's not quite an entitlement, but it's pretty close. These are allowed uses under certain conditions. I've always been one that would lean towards the idea that if we don't have to have it come before P&Z and City Council, I think that would be preferable. If there's a way where staff can essentially confirm that boxes are being checked, then approval could be granted. That would be something I would prefer as a process. However, I recognize that not all things can go through that process. So is there a way to then identify a threshold that could just go to P&Z? And if there's something that then would have to elevate it to City Council, just sort of in the circumstance, how hard would it be, is my first question, how hard would it be or challenging or time consuming would it be to establish sufficient clear guidelines for all applicants when they're going to get a conditional use permit to say, we know exactly what we need to do to get the city for you guys to sign off on that. Is that an easy process? And then would it, just on top of that, the process of identifying a threshold to say, this really is a P and Z decision, and then this actually is probably something that city council needs to weigh in on?
Maybe I'll start, Mr. Mayor, Councilman Taylor. So that, maybe this helps answer the question with just our current process. So today, if you're not within 300 feet of another drive-through or a residential district, you're approved by staff.
Okay.
With standards, there's still design standards you have to meet. Doesn't mean you can have your driveway and stack one car and then you're out in 10 Mile. There's still standards, but you meet those standards and you're not within 300 feet of a residential district or another drive-through, it's just administrative. 2 weeks, basically, to get through that process once you submit your application. So it's all administrative, doesn't go to P and Z. So even with Councilman Strader's kind of scenario, you could do a tiered approach, right? So again, now if you're 300 feet of those, you go to P and Z today, right? So we tell you, that's about a 90-day process because there's a public hearing. We have to notice the newspaper and neighbors, you got to do neighborhood meeting. It's the next level of scrutiny. We could have this other, I don't know exactly how we do this. I don't know that P and Z just gets to punt without some, to you, if they're like, well, we don't know, let's kick it to city council. We'd probably want to have that defined. They make a recommendation still to council, but it does get to council somehow when, the queuing analysis triggers something, it goes to council, right? So that's kind of where we're at. And again, Bill's got some of that. Now, we have recent contact with some other professionals that design layouts for drive-throughs that we're going to try to see if we can take some of that work they've done in the past and again, vet it through the UDC focus group and then back to council to see if we can do some of that. But again, today, we can tell you, this is your process, staff level, P and Z, no go, or whatever that is.
Just to add a little bit more on that. So any CUP can come to the city council if someone doesn't like the decision the commission made. So they can appeal that to you. Realize that sets it over for another public hearing, and it does cost money. So it's $700. I think that's probably some of the discussion that you wanted to have tonight too, that Councilman Overton probably had too, is yes, there are other mechanisms to get these in front of you already in code. It's more money and time, right? So I do appreciate the conversation tonight though, but that's the other, whether or not, and I'm spitballing ideas too, because I don't have a perfect solution for this other than, like you said, if you generate an exorbitant amount of traffic through a traffic study, then that may be the case it comes to you. Because obviously ACHD, ITD, they have thresholds for traffic studies. And maybe that's the kicker. I don't know. But that's one way where it could get in front of you. Or the other conversation with the council, if you wanted to change code for drive-throughs, is it your intent to bypass P and Z or still keep them as a recommending body? Because if that's the case, then you're really not gaining anything, any value or time.
I was just going to add that, Bill, thank you for bringing it, that you could, we do have some application types where just from staff to council, DA mods, right? They don't go to the P and Z. So you could do something similar if we have those, whatever those metrics are and says, hey, this threshold go to council. I mean, we could model, I don't want to jump to that solution necessarily, just saying that is an option. If council really wants to see these drive-throughs, however that gets defined, we could do it that way too and bypass P and Z altogether and just in the interest of time, because every hearing is 30, 45 days to a schedule and additional cost for everybody.
Mr. Mayor, quick follow-up.
Yes, Mr. Taylor.
So you'd mentioned the experts, and I remember that from our last meeting that you had come in contact with them. I assume you're still looking to get some information or meeting. I'm not sure where you are in that process, but it would seem to me, and maybe this is just more of a comment than a question, that maybe there's some clarity that they can provide around the entire process of designing that could just add another layer of clarity about what's really an acceptable design for drive-throughs and then what's really something that really needs to come before council. I'm all in favor of having as much of this figured out administratively, as you said. In thinking about it, having to go through multiple processes of public hearings, like if we don't need to do that, I don't really want to do that. I'm not asking for more things to come before a city council, but if there's more we can clean up on the front end, that'd be my preferred desire. I'm intrigued by the idea of, cutting out a month or, month and a half of wait time and hearing times and noticing for something that probably doesn't need to take place, so.
So Mayor, Council, just Councilman Taylor, so Councilmember Overton is part of that UDC focus group committee, so he'll be part of that discussion with that gentleman, so he'll be looped in and get educated like the rest of us. So really, probably the biggest takeaway that my conversation with that gentleman as far as designing drive-throughs is some of the information he shared with me is they actually have 2 stacking standards as part of their drive-through. So the first stack of vehicles is the distance between where the ordering window is and the menu board, and then you have another stack from the menu board to where you enter the drive-through. And so that to me was very intriguing. How do you build that into your code? And he sent me an example or a graphic of how it works. So I think this particular place, they required a minimum of 5 vehicles between the window and the menu board, and then an additional 4 vehicles from the menu board to the entrance of the stacking lane. So you're looking at a minimum of 9 vehicles per stacking lane is how they kind of did it in this one jurisdiction. So that was an intriguing thought to look at that and see how that would play into our design standards moving forward. But just wanted to share some of that information with you tonight.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Little Roberts.
Mr. Mayor, Caleb and Bill, have we had any in the last year and a half that have triggered doing analysis that we're aware of?
Yeah. Mayor, members of the council, Councilwoman Little Roberts. I was trying to look that up. I know I have seen some from ACHD, and I was like, what's a queuing analysis? And then I also reached out to Mindy and asked her when she would require that. And I'm sorry, I don't remember all the discussion off the top of my head, but I know there is a threshold for that. So I can't give you any specifics tonight. I apologize for that.
If I can, and I don't know, I didn't have those conversations. I actually wrote it down to figure out when they required it, so I haven't had those conversations yet. I will say though, we have had some businesses come to town with a cult following, and a lot of them, and this isn't going to character of any business or not, but a lot of them kind of anticipate that, and they don't want their patrons to have a bad experience either, right? They don't want them to be in fender benders. They don't want them to have to wait longer than necessary, however you define that. But they will talk with us and our police department and others to come up with a traffic control plan and something that really, they're not trying to be, in my experience, they're not trying to be bad neighbors or cause issues, right? We want them to be a successful business in our community, right? By not negatively impacting others. So to some degree, and this is a separate conversation, but related, that queuing analysis, I don't know that that is the only thing we want to rely on, because you got a private business that's they're hiring the person to write the queuing analysis, right? So you have the prisoners are in charge of anyways, some of those studies and reports, I don't trust very much. I'll just say it that way. They're being paid to write some analysis by the person that wants it to show that don't need to do a whole bunch of improvements. So maybe there's something else that we look at or have, again, a peer review of those things that say, yeah, really? We kind of question if that's going to be enough. So that's where I too want to be part of these conversations with these professionals. Because again, I think they are trying to be good actors for the most part and understand their impacts, and so their business can function.
So council, food for thought that I don't know if I'm going to throw a wrench into this or not, but I think it's perspective on thoughts. We often reply to people when they reach out to the city, say, we don't approve individual businesses, we approve uses. And when we start getting to the question about, is there a cult following for a business or not, that really does change, I think, that viewpoint and that dynamic if we are going to be approving, or considering what we allow or don't allow based upon how successful or not successful we think a business can or be. Now, it doesn't mean you want to close your eyes, but it also does beg the question in this context, because quite frankly, the size of the property, in my opinion, dictates more of this than anything. You put a very cult-like following business out on 10 acres, nothing else, do you need to go through all the processes that you're talking about? Potentially, and I'm not saying we're talking about anything specifically, but that may be a very different scenario than some of the situations where council has said, that's too many drive-throughs on property. You know, you've had that conversation as well. So I think that I didn't know really where the conversation was headed tonight, and we've heard a lot of things. In fact, and we've seen a lot of things that have not gone well. We see how drive-throughs create conflict points. Well, you know, look right up here. We can go to one that no one here was approved. I don't even think Mr. Neri was here, but up at the Taco Bell and the Kentucky Fried, yeah, that's a mess in that area with drive-throughs and intersection points for people trying to access areas. There is another one just right a little further down on Meridian Road, right past Overland, that has created a mess because of a drive-through. So I don't know how you honestly can create rules and standards for how busy the drive-through is going to be when we actually have issues with simple drive-throughs on properties. And I'm not going to say we'd have a right or a wrong process, but these things have a life of their own. And if you get to the point where you think it's going to be successful and then it goes away and someone else comes in, or you don't think it's going to be successful and someone else goes in and comes away, you know, that's not our business model as a city. You know, we're not saying you can't go into that defunct bank to do your very cult-like business, even though there's no queuing, you know, situation required, because so I put that out there just it's a great intellectual conversation. I don't have a solution, but I think that what I've seen this council do is when things come forward and you think that there's going to be a problem or a challenge, you've taken action towards that and you've made that part of the conversation. And I think that's an important thing for everyone to do in these things, because, you know, they do create the conflict points, you know, in most developments. And I've appreciated what council has deliberated over, even though I understand everyone wanted to, you know, extend the process and make it smooth, but they change all the traffic patterns in every area and the walking patterns in every area. And we need to be mindful of that in that context. So just, that's all I got. I know nothing else besides that. So,
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Overton.
Well, and just to kind of end my comments this evening, at no point do I think that you guys aren't doing a fantastic job, or that planning and zoning isn't doing their job. I think they're all doing their job very well. I was saying, in law enforcement for years, if it was predictable, it was preventable. And I would just hope in some of these instances, if we can predict that we're going to have a situation and just because of its location, we may end up with a problem, that in some form or fashion, it's also preventable, that we can do everything in our power to do that. And if that ends up being at a different spot or location than coming to council, and we have the right process in place that gets that done, then that takes care of it. You know, the goal here is not to make a process longer as much as it is. I'd like to make sure that we're putting businesses in our city that are going to be successful, but also that their impacts to their neighbors will leave them successful as well.
Mr. Overton, did you have a question for anybody from the audience?
Actually, Mr. Mayor, yes, I actually have a member from the audience that I spent quite a bit of time talking to about an upcoming drive-through. If permitted, I'd love to have him spend a few minutes. He just went through this process at planning and zoning, and I'd love to hear firsthand how that process went. We've discussed what we think the process should look like, what a business owner thinks that looked like from his perspective.
Okay, Mr. Neri, were you going to say something?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, my only concern is that particular property owner here, that case is still pending and can be appealed. So it could be in front of you. So I'd be apprehensive, and unless it's a very generic comment that the gentleman has, it's still an appealable case. So he still could bring that forward. So again, I don't know what he wants to say, and if it's very general, it's fine, but we do have to make sure the record doesn't get tainted by a conversation here on a case that he could still appeal it.
Understood. We'll leave that to the business owner if he believes it would be very generic, or if it's better not to make those comments at this time and just leave this in our hands.
If you can, Barry, if you want to come up and at least say what you're going to say on, so everyone can hear it.
And just,
If you can state your name,
Barry
Perry.
Coles, and I represent the Copper Canary Building at 2590 North Eagle Road. What has been talked about tonight is very similar to the situation that we're in right now. Most of you know, or maybe some don't know, we had an entrance on Eagle Road that was closed, and then there was a right turn lane put in, and so our customers, our employees, make a right turn around our building, go into our parking lot. So that's the new entrance for us, which is actually just fine. We're happy with it. We understood coming in that we were going to get closed, and I think it's a lot safer for our customers and our employees. So I think in all, it was a good idea. The issue that I have is the right turn lane is a 25-foot wide lane, and then it goes to we'll just call it a backage road, because the two lots that are north of me, which are undeveloped, and obviously one of them is in process right now of getting approval. The backage road is, again, only north-south, just the distance of the two lots. And then on the other side of that 25-foot wide road is a hotel that's going in. It's about 130 units. It's the Wyndham Hotel. Behind that is 340 apartments that are now being finished also that are going to be on that same road. And then they opened it up to the 400 and something apartments just behind us. So we have about 800, 900 units that people are going to come out. We've already seen moving vans. We've seen a lot of things. And what I'm really concerned with is the amount of traffic on a 25-foot wide road that's, again, very short north to south. And you can pass a car and a truck in either direction, but there's no ability to stack anything. So when you put in, a really successful business drive-through, particularly, where are the cars going to go? The first place that I see them going is they'll back up to Eagle Road, because the second right turn lane will go into that. You'll right turn lane into that, and that area is where you go into Trader Joe's also. So again, you have that too, and then they come through the back of the lot, and there's really no place for the cars to go. There's only a couple, there's a double drive-through of 7 cars each.
Get a little specific. Yeah,
I'm sorry.
So stacking of,
Stacking.
inadequate stacking for drive-through.
Stacking for drive-through is a really big issue because there's nowhere for the cars to go. And we have all this tremendous traffic coming from all the things being built and developed all in the exact same spot. And I'm really concerned about my customers being able to get to my property, and certainly to get there safely and to get out safely, because the entrance and exit of our parking lot is right on the edge of that road. We have nowhere else to go. And so everything is converging in 2-3 different directions in the exact same place. So at a minimum, I would love to see, some kind of solution, whether they widen the road 10 feet to have a stacking lane. I'm not against businesses.
So maybe you just want to see the second lanes contained to the property and not extend out to other areas.
Correct.
And is the property able to accommodate that or not?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to be more general.
Right, yeah. Is there a place for all the traffic and all the cars to go? And that's my concern, and it doesn't appear to be like that. So again, as a property owner, as a business, and we have about 50, 60 parking spaces. So we have plenty of parking. But what's coming about, there's no place to park, there's no place to stack. So I don't know what to do other than I just feel it's going to be chaotic and dangerous.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, quick follow-up.
Councilman Overton.
I know when I explained to Perry before he came tonight, that what we're talking about is future applications, not the ones that are in front of us or in process right now. Because for us to go back and make any changes or modifications or simplify this process, we can't really do that with anything that's already in process right now. So we've had that conversation. Again, I think the whole goal is when some of these products come in to different areas and they're kind of piecemeal, pieces may initially look like they're all going to fit together, but that's not necessarily the case when we're dealing with collector roads and arterial roads so close to these projects. So I appreciate the comments from planning again tonight. I think there's solutions in front of us. I don't exactly know what that is, but I think there's ways that we can tighten this up. And I hope to work closely with their work group on that language as we continue to go.
Well, maybe you just said something right there that is, proximity to road. I mean, in a lot of ways. I mean, that can be an indicator of certain challenges, at least from what we've visually seen around the city, is when you are accessing in and out. So, sorry, that was not in and out around a specific area. That's where you get the conflicts, is when the, drive aisle exits near where the entrance exits also exists on the property or close to a major roadway in that context. So again, I don't know, but that's what I tried to infer from all these, is how do you apply that? Should you apply that in any specific situation? So great conversation.
Mr. Mayor.
Missionary.
And just a couple things I think maybe as the committee, and the UDC committee discusses some of this, keep in mind, I mean, again, and I think this is the challenge that planning is always dealing with, is trying to distinguish what we might think commonsensically are different uses of property, but legally are very difficult to change. I mean, we're talking about the properties that at one point maybe was approved for a convenience store, and now it's a drive-through. Now, we might see those, and the average person would say those are two different things, but if I had to legally define why is that use of the property different, it isn't significantly different. I mean, many convenience stores have drive-throughs in them, and they have stacking lanes, and they have multiple cars, and they're very popular. Again, we've never had, until the last few years in the city, the impact of particular businesses, as Councilmember Overton said, that have this very large popular following. I mean, we had one. We had Krispy Kreme. That was it. Didn't have a whole lot of businesses like that. It was very unheard of for the city. I agree with the mayor. I wasn't here when they approved Taco Bell and Kentucky Fried Chicken, but I was here when they tried to put another one in the middle of it, and that's why we don't allow 3 drive-throughs on properties anymore, because it's almost impossible to make them function. So that's really the challenge, and even in this conversation, I think all of you can see, it's very hard to distinguish, well, why is this different? This was approved to be a bank, now it's a food restaurant. The McDonald's on 10 Mile and Cherry Lane was originally going to be a laundry, and then it became a McDonald's. So, I mean, it really, when you get right down to it from the planning side and the legal side, it's really hard to carve these out. That's why they're looking for standards like roadway access. The mayor brought a great point. Access to arterials and those things that are much more generic and objective rather than based on what type of business it is or this type. That really can't have discretion. And that's part of the reason why it was changed from a council decision to the planning and zoning, is because it's predominantly driven by the code. It's not a discretionary choice, and the council tends to have decisions that have some level of discretion. Is it good for the city? Is this a good use of the city to have this type of business here? Or when you get right down to it, as Caleb said, it's almost an approved type of use with conditions. Those are very code-driven issues. What's the conditions? Not, is this a good idea? It's already been decided it's an okay idea. So now it really is had been down at the P and Z level. All of those can change, all of those reasons can change, but we really have to try to keep it at that very, narrowly focused on objective things and not discretionary things. So that's kind of what we've been looking for.
Okay, any council, anything further on this topic?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Schrader.
Yeah, just, your comments got me thinking. I was kind of wondering if planning had thought about, maybe looking at some case studies of here are we don't have to name names, but maybe just here are examples of drive-throughs that we don't think function well. Maybe taking some examples and trying to, take a look at our standards through that lens. I mean, that might be one way to try to do it. I feel like having some case studies or kind of some examples might help crystallize it. I guess I was sort of thinking about the discretion. It may be in a narrower way where if planning and zoning felt like, there were certain factors that were kind of extraordinary, that they would have the ability to send it to us for, for us to weigh in. But I understand, kind of the challenge. And I do agree. A business might start out with an overwhelming amount of demand and then it can calm down too, right? So I want to be sensitive to that. Like, just because somebody opens and has a crazy month doesn't necessarily mean that that's the kind of steady state that we're going to expect once it's kind of a mature business. So I also want to be sensitive to that. I am very, I hate having a concentration of a large number of drive-throughs in one small area. So that to me is kind of an important point. It sounds like we've already covered that in our standards, but I'd want to make sure that we're kind of covering that pretty comprehensively. I don't know where we're going to go with this tonight because, it's kind of an open topic. It feels like it needs to go through a focus group. We need more information about the conditions that trigger queuing reports and so forth.
Based on what I heard, I thought Councilman Overton was going to be working with planning and outside to maybe examine this in further detail is kind of what I heard as next steps.
Got it.
Mr. Mayor, that's correct. I was already going to be a part of focus groups moving forward, and now this would become one of our agenda items in that process.
Okay. Councilman Kavanaugh, anything else? Okay. Thank you very much. We'll look forward to the ongoing conversation and many more land use applications that involve drive-throughs, I'm certain. So, perfect. Council, anything under future meeting topics or a motion to adjourn?
Mayor,
Councilman Kavanaugh.
we adjourn the meeting.
Motion adjourned. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned.
Have a great night.